Hello and welcome to the Motogp Xtra podcast. Joining me as always is Rhys. Now, Rhys, round four of the Motogp season is upon us. But first, we had an exemplary press conference before start of the weekend. Do you want to take it away?
Yeah, well, it was at a really weird point because it was like on Friday, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and it was just basically just
Friday night, I believe.
yeah, it was just sort of sandwich. It was sandwiched in like the lunch break. It was really
Yeah.
really weird. Like, 'cause to be honest, I've been watching the bikes all morning, sort of gone away. In fact, it might have been Saturday, but I can't remember. It was one of the days of the weekend anyway. It's stuck in a really weird place. I would have thought you'd do at a different point of the weekend, and I saw that there's this press conference. I was like, what's this all about? Because we'd already had this weird thing going on with Marquez having a press conference, and then he didn't have a press conference earlier on in the weekend. So I was like, what is this all about? And I saw who was in it, Jorge Villegas or George Villegas. I'm not 100% sure how he pronounces it specifically because of where he's from. But either way, the FIM president, Carmelo Espeleta, and then Gregorio Lavia. And I was like, that's a weird group of people to put together. The first two sort of make sense, but Gregorio Lavia is a superbike man. So I was like, what is this to do with the MotoGP press conference? I was thinking, what's going on here? I was a bit worried for a minute that they were going to perhaps like sort of try and do them. They were going to announce they were going to try and do them both on the same weekend or something like that, which just I think wouldn't work and would be a bit weird. But as it turned out, there was actually quite an important announcement. They're setting up a new World Championship next year for women only, a women only World Championship. And to start with, I kind of thought, oh, that's good, like sort of a little talent cup. But having read into it more now for the podcast so that I can talk about it properly, so I just find it a little bit strange. There seems to be like they're pushing for the pinnacle, so it's not actually going to be a talent cup. So basically, the premise of what it is, in case you've missed it and don't know what's happening, it's going to be a 6 round championship, if I'm not mistaken, next year. It's going to be like a World Superbike sort of support race. So it'll be at some of the World Superbike rounds. There'll be this championship. The bikes are not to be decided, but it'll be, well, they haven't been decided or announced yet. But it is going to be a spec series. They're all going to have the same bike. They think it'll be roughly around the super sport capacity. So I'd say somewhere around 600cc, which again, shows that it's not a talent cup, because obviously that's usually for the kids, the 250s, slightly lower capacities. And they've sort of said it's sort of like it's not a talent cup. They said it's sort of a final place for women, which is a bit strange, to be honest. I don't see why they'd split them up. Like, if it was a talent cup, I'd be like, great, I'm all for it, because to get some more in there. Obviously, there's a smaller pool of women that want to be motorcycle racers to start with. The reason for that is a separate issue, obviously, but that's a fact. No one can debate that. Whatever's caused that, so it means it's less likely you'll get a good one that's good enough to get to World Championship, because it's such a small talent pool to pick from. So to try and nurture that talent and bring the best of that talent pool and make them better and try and support them all the way through, that's a great idea. But to just sort of set up this random championship just seems a bit bizarre to me. I don't know what you think about it, but I don't see why separating them into this 600 super sport class and then saying this is the pinnacle, is all they should get to, is it's a bit counterintuitive, when really for me should be supporting them all the way through the system just to try and get more in there. And then obviously the talent pool will just grow off the back of that, because more girls will see girls in the motorsport and want to get into it themselves. And it's a bit of a cycle. You've got to put the effort in first, obviously, get it through. But I just find it strange to just separate them into a random championship rather than actually helping them get into the championships where it's just mixed category. Because motorsport is one of the few sports where you actually can have mixed categories, and I think that's probably one of the best parts about it. Well, it's a good part about it, that you can have anybody can compete in it. It doesn't have to be, there's not massive differences like there is in a lot of other sports.
Yeah, to be fair, it was a couple of hours before we were going recording the podcast. We were just talking over our notes, and I had left all the women's stuff out because I wasn't even aware about it. I'd heard about the press conference on Friday or Saturday. It's such a long weekend now. It's hard to keep up what day is day. But you, I understand what the idea of it is, but I think they've gone about it the wrong way. I agree completely that it should be a feeder series. It shouldn't be. They shouldn't slap from what we've been told, 600cc ish. It's basically playing into all the females aren't big or strong enough for big bikes. The 600 is their max. it's not really. It's quite sexist in the fact that it's not a like it's the be all and end all, and it's going to be a 600 class. And it's going to be like a super sport. I don't know how I feel about that. I think if it was a Motor 2 style feeder class, like we'd say Junior GP is or European GPs or whatever you want to do, be brilliant. Get them on the tracks everybody knows. Get them up to speed with everything, and they'd grow. But it's just weird having an old drone championship because now, surely, if I'm Maria Herrera, if I am Ana Carrasco, if I could name any of the top women in the world, do I want to battle for P16 in Moto 3 or P26? No, I'm going to go to this. They haven't given it a name yet, like a full blown name yet, and advertising it, but I'm going to go to the CML Championship. I'm going to rock the thing. I'm going to be amazing. Look, I always look at Scott Redding's career. When he was struggling with Pramac and when he was out of his seat and everyone was saying, well, where's he going to go? And he's going back to BSB, and I was like, oh, it's a massive step back. And a lot of ex-racers and current commentators saying, while riding, it's great to be at the top level. It's also great to be competing in a class where you're doing well. It gives you good feeling. So we're going to see a lot of women who probably have the potential to ride in the men's categories, which we kind of class as a mixed category. We're going to see them all jump ship to this one, meaning we're going to lose them from the GP paddock. So it's a bit of a shame. It's a bit of a weird one considering we have a full women's team in Moto 3. I don't know, it's a weird decision really, but we just wanted to kind of get it out there before the start of the podcast, have a little word about it. But to me, it's a bit of a weird one. Rhys, I don't know if you want to finish off anything else, do you have any other thoughts about it? For me, it's a bit of a weird to segregate them from the rest of the paddock.
Yeah, well, basically just the same sort of opinion with you there, because, like you say, it'd be better if it was just a little talent cup. You make a good point mentioning the Angelus MTA team. They would be great, to sort of get them involved. They have a junior GP team and things like that as well. So if you could have a lower category, I think the issue is there's something that's sort of happened with the formula categories, like the open wheel car racing, that they've had their women's series. It's not worked because, one, they've not given enough of a prize money out to go get a seat, but then two, there's no support. I think if you want to actually get more into the sport, you need to have the classes obviously at a lower level to get them while they're younger to actually get into it, because let's be honest, it's a sport you have to start from when you're young. You can't just, you can't turn up at like 20 years old and start for a first time. All right, maybe there's the odd person that can do that, but you're never going to get to a high level. If you're trying to get them to a high level, you got to start them off when they're quite young, and you need to get them into sort of a talent cup kind of thing. But then you need to have a team that they can go into junior GP, and then maybe a team that they can get into Moto 3. I know that obviously you want them to be able to get into the regular teams, get through in a legitimate sense, if that makes sense. But you need to have the support system there to make the category make sense. But then they're just whacking, them all in the 600 category. I mean, you kind of make a good point when you're saying about Herrera and Carrasco going over to those categories. But to be fair, like, in terms of high level, I don't think I've ever seen another woman in Grand Prix. So you've got those two that have been in Grand Prix, but surely there's only going to be riders that haven't made it to Grand Prix lower. So it's going to be unfair if they go over, if that makes any sense. I mean, you could also argue from another point that actually, it's a good point that I say that I only really know those two from what I've seen at Grand Prix level before, because there will be these unknown women that get into the spotlight and model to show that they're good. But it's one of those things where you don't have anything to gauge them against. And let's say you get Herrera and Carrasco going in there and they're just wiping the floor with everybody. That completely ruins everybody that's behind them, because no one's going to ever sign them because they're going to think they're not good enough. And that's not going to help those two either, because people are going to be like, well, you couldn't cut it in these classes, so you've just gone over there to win. So I don't see it being I see what they're trying to do, but I just don't see it working, to be honest. I just don't see it being a benefit for anybody, unless obviously it pans out in a specific way, but I just don't see it happening.
I think making it a one-off class is a bit weird because it separates. Now maybe what we've heard, we don't know the full picture yet, we could say. Maybe it's like this is the premier class. Like back in the day, they would have announced MotoGP as their main class and then brought in Moto 2 and Moto 3 and 125s or whatever it was. You don't start off with League 2 and in 5 years' time announce the Premier League. You start with the Premier League and then you bring the steps towards it. So maybe we'll get a female Red Bull rookies or something along that lines. We'll get a female Superbike class in a couple of years, maybe. We might expand upon this, and if that's the case, then it might be. But again, you make good points that with the Formula Series, that if they're not fully funded, supported with TV rights, we're kind of wasting our time because unfortunately it's money that makes the world go round. But I think we spent enough time on it. We just wanted to get it in before we got into the Jerez weekend, since it was such a big announcement. But Moto 3 race, typical European race. Jerez is known for being quite difficult to overtake. Nobody told the Moto 3 boys that. We're going to start off with Yamanaka. He's been in the class now a couple of years. He's had a couple of different seats. He's always been a mid-table rider until today, where he was showing promise into his mechanical. What did you make of the young rider today?
Yeah, he was definitely showing some promise for once, because he's been pretty anonymous throughout his Moto3 career. He first came in, was it 2020 with Estrella Galicia, if I'm not mistaken. He was with them first, but I'm not 100% sure on the year. He was then with the MT Helmets team last year, partnering Moreira. And then he's moved off to the championship winning outfit, Gas Aspar, this year. So clearly, obviously Aspar sees something in him. But so far, both riders, I think you could argue, have not really been at the front at all, so you've not really seen much of them. But this is probably the first time we saw Yamanaka, and he was looking pretty good. He'd been pretty quick over the course of the weekend, to be fair. So had Alonso, his teammate. We'll get onto him later on, though, of course. But yeah, he was looking good in the race. He was looking quite comfortable, looking like he could make some passes. And then I think it had cut away to a different battle, and it cuts back, and Yamanaka's coasting on the straight. It reminded me very much of when Fabio Quartararo had a similar thing, where he finally was showing a good weekend in MotoGP. Well, I mean, he'd been decent before that, but he was showing a really competitive weekend, and then his gear shifter failed on that same back straight, and then he was out of the race. It's just, yeah, it was a shame for him. It really was a shame, because he was looking good, but hopefully he can try and build on that momentum, move forward. Hopefully this may be a bit of a turning of the corner for both of them. But of course, there are going to be some weird races that come up probably later on in the season where they might struggle again. But now that maybe he'll believe a bit more. Now that he's been at the front, he might start to believe. And with it being a mechanical failure as well, sort of in his head, he'll be like, "Oh, I could have got on the podium. I could have won." And because there was so much of the race still to go, there wasn't time for him to either actually prove to himself that he could do that or show that he couldn't. So in his head, I'm sure he'll have a lot more belief, because the reason why he didn't get the result was not his fault. So in his head, I'm sure he'll be thinking that he can try and do it again, and hopefully he can.
Yeah, he actually, according to his Wikipedia, made his debut in Moto3 in 2019, but he only did 4 races: Qatar, Mugello, Catalonia, and Japan. Best result of 9th. Did most of the season in 2020, but it wasn't until 2021 where he got onto a KTM in the car expert Bristol GP team that he actually...
He was with Bristol, yeah, because he was teammates with Dupasquier, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, in fairness, bless him, Dupasquier. Looking at results last year, there was a good string of 8 places. He's had, about 6 or 7 8 places last year, a couple of top 5s. He's one of those riders you could say that he's in the group, but he's never the one that makes... 5. He got a top 5 in Italy last year.
Yeah, I guess that kind of proves the point that you're making, that you don't actually notice him, because I never.
He's a bit of an invisible man.
Yeah.
So he's building again. It's his 4th full season in the class. It's kind of now where you expect him to come through. A lot of riders, not everyone can be a Pedro Acosta, come in, win amazingly in the opening season, win many races. A lot of these kids struggle with the travel, with the diet. They are kids at the end of the day. So you just need to understand that it might take them 2 years of traveling around the world before it's a bit more normalized to them, and they can actually go and just focus on riding their bike, and they don't have to worry about the rest of the ongoing off the track. So it's good to see him make a progress. It was good to see him up there, and again, like you said, that such a high profile team have kind of picked him up. You'd imagine that they have seen something and they do believe. And I must say, on Twitter, I've seen some of his training videos. He does some top rack-esque moves on a motocross bike and a supermoto. So, in fairness, shame with the mechanical. He showed so much promise, and he was so unhappy when he got off the bike. He just shows the rider full of fire. And he's building. He's still quite young. I believe he is only 21 years old, so he'll be 22 at the end of the season. So he's still not really not really under pressure for age. He still has plenty of time left in him, so it's good to see another rider coming through. But we're going to move on now to the group of 9, Rhys. We had about 9 riders, 10 riders, 8, 9, 10. We had a couple of groups built, but towards the end, when they all started jockeying for position, the group ended up at about 9 for the win. What did you make of your standard Moto 3 race, really? It was pretty, at this point, I wouldn't say it's boring by any means, but it's what you come to expect from your lightweight class.
Yeah, it doesn't really phase you anymore when you get that kind of thing. I mean,
Exactly.
imagine in MotoGP if you had a battle of 9 for the win. It'd be unbelievable, wouldn't it? Or Moto 2. But Moto 3, it's kind of expected at this point. There was actually a bit of a breakaway at the beginning. To be honest, it was a bit caused by Onshu being a bit of a, sort of a cork in the bottle. I suppose we'll come on to Onshu in a little bit. But yeah, there's a bit of a breakaway to begin with. A couple of riders trying to pull away. Holgado, obviously, was running the pace. Can't remember who went with him now, to be honest. But there was a couple of them that pulled away. And then Messia then sort of caught them back up. Then they dragged everybody else with him.
Oh, it was Ortola, wasn't it? The two of them pulled away.
Yeah, I think it was Ortola. Yeah, I think the two of those pulled away. Then they got caught back up and it formed that big group. Yeah, and like you say, there was the standard battling. I must say, some really good and clean passes as well. It was some clean racing at the front, which is quite a surprise to see in Moto 3 because oftentimes it's not. I can't really think of anything where I thought, oh, that was a bit on the line. There was some fantastic passes through those fast corners. I was really, really impressed with some of the passes going on, and I guess it kind of just shows sometimes how high the level of Moto 3 is. Like, in the past, you've looked at it, and sometimes we still look at it, like, obviously it's the first category for them at World Championship level, and they're learning the craft, but at a track where they all know it pretty well, like Jerez, you get them all there, and all of a sudden it's a bit more. They're looking really good, really professional. They've been doing it for a long time because I suppose they've been on Moto 3 bikes for many years now with the lower categories. They've raced Jerez for many years, and they all know the track so well. They can pull these passes, and yeah, it was a nice, fun race to watch because it wasn't one of those ones where you're watching through the cracks in your fingers because there wasn't anyone really doing anything particularly crazy.
Yeah, like your only man that you could probably say was going to do something crazy was Onshu, and
Yeah, well,
because he just didn't have it today. And after he was so quick on Saturday, and he seemed very quick towards the later part of the day, and really, I'd like to know why. He's been quick here in the past. I just don't know why in the race he didn't have it. It was a bit of a shame really because I feel like with him, he gets that win floodgates. Now you hear that about a lot of riders, but I actually believe with him because it's most weekends he shows up, he has pace, he has promise. He's the criminal act of overriding and trying too hard. In my notes here, I've down that one of his biggest strengths is one of his biggest weaknesses, and unfortunately, it's just that. It's just what makes him so quick is also what makes him ragged and rough and scruffy in the point where you need a cool head, you need to focus on brake markers, you need to take your right corner speed, you need to position yourself in the last sector. And fortunately, Onshu threw the way. He was probably the main one. In a big group like that, Onshu always, I feel like he can pull off these great moves. He can do it. It's just he doesn't have that whereabouts and that racecraft really to finish it off. Like, personally, I think he's slightly too big. I'd like to get your opinion on this. But in my eyes, I don't think he's done enough to deserve a decent Moto 2 ride. And like, Moto 2 is your shark pit of MotoGP these days. You go into Moto 2, you struggle, you can kind of get lost. It's happened to a lot of riders over the last couple of years. They go into the class, bikes aren't easy, tires aren't probably the most modern, we could say, with the Dunlop. I think they do a great job of doing what they need to do, but they're not very they're not cutting edge, shall we say. So if he's to move up, I don't see him getting a top tier seat. So he's kind of caught in a window of he either needs to start sorting out his Moto 3 career, or he's probably going to get a B-rated seat in Moto 2. I'd like to get your opinion on that, really, just see what you think about that.
yeah, Onshu, it was a strange one today because obviously you've put in your notes here that his strength is his biggest weakness as well, sometimes his biggest strength, but it was just slow. Like, he just didn't have the pace that he had in the other races. I don't think he particularly did a lot wrong. I think then once he realised he was slow, he started pushing too hard and he picked up all those track limits warnings, and perhaps maybe that's where his weakness himself lies, is that he gets flustered and he tries too hard and he overrides it. I think BT Sport were on about it in practice, they're making a good point talking about, does the sort of the training that they do with the Keenan Safwaglu really work? Obviously, it works for making those aggressive passes, but if you look at Dennis and you look at Chan, his twin brother, they pull some very aggressive passes. They're known as very aggressive riders in both their categories. But Chan has only ever won one race in World Supersport, and Dennis hasn't ever won in Moto3. And they're very similar when you actually watch the races. Like, they're always so close to winning a race. Just finally one did work for Chan in the end. But yeah, you get a similar vibe from them watching. Like, sort of the way they ride, they're really aggressive, but then they just sort of fade, or they could be really quick in qualifying, but then they're not there when it comes to the race. It just, I don't know, maybe the fact that they just attack too much is their problem, so they don't really carry the pace, and they clearly, I mean, Dennis, anyway, we may as well just talk about Dennis at least. He seems to use his tyre a lot as well. I don't know, he sort of came on a bit again at the end of this race, but then he already got those warnings, he got the long lap. I mean, he couldn't overtake anybody anyway. You could see that he was just struggling to keep on the back. But yeah, he is a strange one, and I think you're right. He probably is too big at this point. Obviously, when he first got into Moto3, he was really little. It was quite funny because Chan was always the big one, but now Dennis has sort of shot up and matched his brother. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see him in a Moto2 team. I was actually saying this to you earlier before we did the podcast. I was kind of surprised that Io didn't take him up this year, because I know you say he doesn't really deserve a top flight ride, and to be honest, I agree with you. But clearly they like him, right? Because alright, he was with Tech 3 before, but Tech 3 is literally in the same colours as the Io bike, effectively. Like, it is a factory team. It's one of the factory teams, even though there aren't really factory teams in Moto3. It kind of is, if that makes sense. It is the main KTM team. He was part of the main KTM academy. And it's just like, if you think he's good enough to then move up to the main IO team, why not just give him a go in Moto2? Okay, I kind of get that it's one of the best bikes on the grid, so maybe they don't want to move him up onto the best bike on the grid and sort of sacrifice a seat, but they could have, like, at least pushed to get him into Moto2 in some aspect. I think maybe putting him on that second IO bike wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world for him, because, I mean, the alternative that they picked was Arenas, and I don't think he's really shown either that he deserves the IO seat. In fairness, he's been alright on the bike, he's done a decent enough job, so that's not a slight at Arenas, but I'm saying when you're sort of picking a random rider anyway, why not take someone that's in your academy system? Because I thought the same thing with Messier a couple of years ago. It's like, why not give him a chance in Moto2? Because he's been in Moto3 for so long, you kind of get a bit stuck sometimes. So, yeah, I think I'd like to see him in Moto2. I think maybe, obviously, the IO thing's not going to work. I don't think he's ever going to go there in Moto2, because he's there in Moto3 now, and he's obviously not quite performing. But I'd like to see maybe in a lower team. Just trying to think, where could he go? He could be good at stop and go, maybe. I think they took quite a rough Remy Gardner and made him into a decent-ish rider, and then obviously he then took the step into IO and became something special. But Gardner first started showing his good performances on the stop and go. Really, I think Onshu would be a better choice than Dalla Porta. So yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting to see him in Moto2, and I think someone should sign him this year, regardless of what he actually ends up doing this season. I think he needs to move out of Moto3. If he can't get into Moto2, then he needs to try and go elsewhere, but I don't think he should stay in Moto3 any longer, because like you say, he's too big, he's been in the class for a while, and his riding style just does not work on a Moto3. You don't brake late on a Moto3, you don't do the Brad Binder strategy on a Moto3. Obviously, I know it worked for him at the time, but he still had a more Moto3 way about it. Whereas Onshu seems to ride his Moto3 bike like a point and squirt, which obviously doesn't really work when you haven't got the power.
Yeah, I agree that maybe Dalla Porta isn't really suited to Moto2. Now I know he's had a few shoulder injuries since his title win in Moto3, but I think he's probably someone that has days are numbered in the junior or the middleweight class. Sorry, so would be a good swap maybe. I could see him following suit with his brother and going to the World Paddock. I could see him on like an R6 something. I could see him doing something good there. His brother has pace in Superbikes, but again, he kind of suffers the same ill fate of Denise. But moving on to someone who had a decent race, but after what happened the last two races, it's a pretty good job. Ayumu Sasaki, salvage job or underperforming?
Um, to be fair, I'm not going to say he's underperforming because he's been really, really fast at every race so far this season. Made two unforced errors, you know, but given the benefit of the doubt in Argentina, that it was tricky conditions. It does happen. It's easy to crash in those conditions, but America was a little bit less forgivable because he just took the lead and then immediately high-sided. You know, that's something that you don't want to do. Obviously, it's crashing out of the lead. You never want to do it. You don't want to crash out of any position, but especially when you've just taken the lead. Obviously, he was very fast last year, and this same kind of thing happened to him in terms of that he crashed or he was injured and lost a lot of points that way. And it seems to be very, very similar this year, because I think if you look at outright pace, he's probably the fastest guy so far over like one lap, but he's definitely one of those riders that struggles in the race. He had a good race today, obviously. Well, I don't know, say a good race. He had a good comeback in the end, but I was thinking,
recovery.
Yeah, it was a good recovery. I remember thinking sort of midway through the race, he's a bit anonymous this weekend after, 2 weekends where he scored nothing, so he needed to bounce back. So, I mean, he at least improved on that. He scored some points today. So, yeah, his comeback was pretty decent, yeah, you'd expect it to be a bit closer to the front with the pace he's shown. He's on the KTM. Well, it's Husqvarna, but it's a KTM, whatever you want to call it. And that's the bike to be on in Moto3 now. I don't think there's any doubt about that one. Even at Jerez, which obviously is a bit more of a Honda track in fairness, but still, it's the bike you want to be on. The team is very good. That sort of Husqvarna, Peter Ertl team is obviously good. Obviously now they've got some Intact GP guys in there as well. So, yeah, a little bit underwhelming from him this weekend, but perhaps he just wanted to bring home the points, so he didn't want to push too hard, so I think that's probably the better thing to do on a weekend where you may be struggling, and just see how he goes in the next one. So, he does need to make up a lot of points, but it is Moto3, and we have seen big swings before, and it's also very easy to lose a race by being taken out, or to finish low down in the race without doing a lot wrong, so he can still make the points back up, but he just needs to just keep finishing the races like he did today.
For me, he's a bit like Foggia last year, where came into season, everybody was tipping him. He'd make one step forward, take two back. So he'll be rapid one week, he'll win, everybody be like, this is the man now for the title. Next 2 weekends, then he'll probably finish ninth and crash out of one needlessly. So I wonder, I always thought with Foggia it was a mental thing. Also, the Honda probably wasn't the bike he needed, but I wonder, Sasaki, is it the same thing? Is it a bit of a mental thing that's holding him back? Because there should be no reason why he's not top 4 every week. And I think that in his own head, he thinks he has to be there. Whereas he could have taken a comfortable top 5 in Argentina. He didn't need to get to the front in Austin. You just need to be there at the end. You need to take, P4 today. I got 12, 15 points this week. I got 9 this week. I got 20 this week. That's how you win a championship in Moto3. You don't go win, crash. You're going to throw it away. Like look at last year, Eisen Guevara, who when he won his championship, didn't win every single race. He was consistently quick. He took home nice points every week, bar a couple of times he got knocked off for a few mistakes. But for the most part, his copybook, there wasn't many blotches on it. He was consistent 10s, 12s, 15s, 20s. And then when on the day that he felt it, 25, and that's what he did, and he won the championship nicely, and he was really quick. Sasaki, I feel like, feels like he has to do a Pedro of 25, 20, 25, 20, 20, 20, 25, and just keep banging in the big scores. And at the moment, that's costing him, in my opinion. But going to move on now to someone who's doing a pretty good job of putting 25s on the board. Ivan Artola. Rhys, one off in Austin, big track, big rider. It's a bit iffy. Jerez, everybody knows it. It's narrow, it's tight, it's the Spanish jewel. What have you made of Ivan Artola's surge to the top of Moto3?
It's great to see, really. I quite rated him beforehand because I can't remember which race it was now, but I think it might have been Qatar. I seem to remember him and Moreira both were doing really well at Qatar, and I thought, these kids are good. These are two good lads. So I've been keeping my eye out on both of them throughout, obviously, the previous season and obviously the first few races of this one. And unsurprisingly, they're both right at the top of the championship. But yeah, it was a great race again from Ortola. A completely different type of race as well. Didn't have to come through the pack. And I think just it clicked with him. It clicked with him last week. He is definitely one of those riders where he clearly had the talent, he had the pace already. Then he got a win, and now he knows he can win, and he's going to be there every week, I would imagine, from now on. So I think everybody else is going to have a bit of a hard time. I think Holgado is going to have to try and start winning some more races to take some points back off Ortola, but yeah, I think you're going to see from Ortola maybe a bit more of a Guevara type character where he's pretty much there every single weekend now that he's got a good result. Because Guevara was kind of there or thereabouts, in his first season and stuff. And then once he got a good result or like got a win, he really started to believe, and he was there every week. And I think he'll get a similar kind of thing from Ortola because he doesn't seem to particularly make a lot of mistakes either. He seems to be pretty clinical with it. Now, I know I'm probably reading into it a bit too much with just 2 races, but 2 very different circuits there, 2 very different wins. He looks calm. He's on a good bike. That team is only going to get better as well because let's not forget they were a rookie team last year as well, the MTA team, the Angelus team as well. Obviously, they've got more influence from that side of it now. Obviously, they were sponsored by them last year, I believe, but I think there is more influence. I think there's more of the sort of Angelus side, some more of the women in the team and stuff like that. So, I think it'd be great to see. To be honest, I think it'd be great to see Ortola continuing this run of form, and I think he can do it. He really, like I said from the very beginning, I've rated him as a good rider. Same with Moreira. I know we're not talking about Moreira now, but they both stuck out to me at the same point. I think the pair of them are going to have a great season.
Yeah, I think he is showing that he is the real deal, and I think he has a good chance of taking this title because Moto 3 every week is a brawl. Anything can happen. So if he keeps putting points on the board, there's no reason why he's not. He's probably, after these 2 races now, he's definitely on everyone's copybook for a Moto 2 seat next year. He is, I believe, as well quite tall. He's slim and tall from what I've seen on TV. He looks quite tall on a. He looks tall on a Moto 3 bike, which usually means he is high 5s or maybe in a low 6-footer. But going forward, keep putting points on the board. Definitely, maybe if he doesn't wrap up the title this year, he doesn't do it. If he stays in the class next year, he could be like Guevara, where he kind of had a couple of results last in his first year. Like, if we all forget that the year Pedro Costa came through was the year Guevara came through. Costa wasn't there, we would have been banging the drum about how amazing Guevara was because he was one of the first to come into the class from the Junior GP, I believe, or did he come from Red Bull Buckies? Oh, I believe it was Junior GP.
He beat Acosta to the Junior GP title.
He did, exactly, thank you. So they were like the first 2 to come in that were like immediately on the Moto 3 pace as a rookie coming up from, we'd say, the old Spanish Championship. But the fact that Pedro was doing so well in his rookie year, he kind of got pushed aside. But if Ortola keeps going, keeps putting on these points, there's no reason why he can't win multiple races this year. And he's already shown that he's done it on 2 of the most opposite tracks, so it wasn't a one-off. So I must say I'm pretty happy with him. Moving on now to another rider. This one is Colombian, first ever Colombian podium. David Alonso, mega quick in Spain. Not really a surprise though, is it?
No, it's not particularly a surprise because obviously he's came through the system there. He is obviously Colombian by like sort of his parents and by his license, but he was born and raised in Spain, so he's going to know the Spanish tracks as well as the Spaniards do because he's effectively from there. So you always expect him to go there pretty well. Obviously, he's been in the Junior GP, Red Bull Rookies. If I'm not mistaken, was he the first rider to ever win both in the same year?
Yeah, he was. So
that gives you the impression of how good this kid is, and he actually had to stay in those categories a year longer than he was meant to because there wasn't enough room for him. Obviously, he was part of the Aspar Academy. Last year they had Garcia and Guevara, probably the 2 best riders in Moto 3 last year. So they couldn't exactly get rid of either of those, so they had to keep them in there. No room for Alonso. Obviously, they don't want to give him to another team because they obviously knew how good the kid was. So they kept him in Junior GP for another year. So another year of honing his craft and just improving, knowing these European tracks more. So when you get to these tracks, you'd expect to see him up there. and he was. He looked really, really good. He was pulling off some clinical passes. I think he thought he actually could have won the race if he didn't make a mistake on the last lap, but to be honest, I didn't really see him make a mistake, so it must have been a very minuscule one, but obviously he's already on top of that kind of thing, so that's great, to see that even it's not a massively visible mistake, he knows when he's made one, and he knows where to improve already. But yeah, if you've won Junior GP at all, that's good enough. If you've won Red Bull Rookies at all, that's good enough. But if you've won both in the same year, you are mega quick, and this could be the start of something special from David Alonso. We've just got to keep his eye on him, because it would be great to see, obviously, a Colombian up there, because we've not had a Colombian since Hernandez, of course. Obviously, it is like the Rodrigo situation where, obviously he lives in Spain and things like that, but with the heritage, with the flag, great for, I'm sure it's great for some Colombians to see one of their own finally up the front, because I think he was the first ever Colombian to get on the podium, wasn't he, today, which is always nice to see.
Yeah, he shows some great promise going forward. And to be honest, his racecraft was really, like, he made an overtake on Messi, I believe, was into the final corner, into Jorge Lorenzo corner. And he was like Brad Binder, he was completely sideways, drifted, and he kind of picked up the ride in front of him, pulled it down to the apex and powered out. And like, to do that on a Moto 3 bike, something about him, I like him. I fancy him to be there or thereabouts for the rest of the season. Now, of course, we're going to go to tracks that he's never been to. Like, there's going to be many tracks out there that he's not going to know. And he might have weekends where he's P17 and that's his limit, but it's a learning curve. It's his rookie year. There will be tracks probably you'd imagine Mugello, Catalonia, of course, probably Assen. The Cathedral race is the home of MotoGP. You'd imagine the tracks they've been to before that. He will show up and he will do what he did today, and we won't be surprised again. There will be no shocks because we know how quick he is. But I think we've gone into enough depth with Moto 3. Now, Moto 2, we're going to probably fly through this because it wasn't an action-packed one, but we're going to start off with a new construction front tyre from Dunlop, something the MotoGP boys wish they were getting from Michelin, but for now, it's a new construction, Rhys. The basis of it, it's just a different construction, the same kind of overall level of grip, just a slightly different construction. Only one rider run it in the race, and it was Iagora, so good to see that Dunlop aren't really sitting on the laurels. They're still trying to produce new tyres, and it's good to see maybe a slightly new tyre going forward. Do you reckon other people will use it? Obviously, Iagora is the only fella today to race it. Could we see it become a bit of a tyre war in Moto 2 now that they have multiple different fronts?
It'll probably vary from track to track. People will perhaps give it a bit of a go, but I mean, if you look at how Agora's race ended and which part of the bike went, maybe people will be staring away from the front tyre he used, but yeah, I don't know. Obviously, it depends just how it feels. I'm sure everyone's probably give it a bit of a go, but it is tricky because you don't have that many sessions, so you can't be messing around too much testing this front tyre, see what it's like. So maybe as the season goes on, they'll test it more. Obviously, it's the compound is the same, you say, but a new construction. So maybe some riders will prefer it, some riders probably won't. I think it'll be a bit of a personal preference thing because the grip should be the same, so it's probably stability and things like that that'll differ. And I know some riders have had issues when they changed the tyres before, so perhaps they'll stick with what they know. But then that might help some of the others that have struggled with the tyre changes. So I can't say for sure because if Agora was the only rider to use it, you can't really say whether it's better. So yeah, I guess we'll just see. Is it just for this race, or are they just going to be bringing it to some of the other races as well? I'm not 100% sure on how it is.
Or more races throughout the season, but I do believe it's only at certain races. I don't think it's going to be one that's
it's like the Val 7 they had a few years ago. It was at some tracks and not others, wasn't it?
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah, I think it's just exactly. But yeah, again, Sean Dunlop aren't kind of sitting back, but we've already touched on Iagora, so we probably should go into detail. Back where he should be, Rhys, or do you reckon it was a flash in the pan? Again, I think his crash was more caused by Arbolino kind of really late overtake, and again, Iagora picked up the bike, and just a small bit of contact from his rear tyre from Arbolino, and that was the end of the race. It was a shame, really, but do you reckon we're back to seeing Iagora at the front again?
I hope so, because obviously he had the injury that he picked up. He picked it up at Rocco's Ranch, doing some motocross, I think it might have been. During the winter. Little scaphoid injury, which, if you don't know as well, is a little bone sort of in your wrist. And according to people that have broke it before, it doesn't get very good blood flow, so it takes a long, long time to heal. And it's one of those things where it probably doesn't restrict you an awful lot because it's only a little bone, but it hurts a hell of a lot. And obviously, a wrist injury on a motorbike is not exactly what you want, especially when, you know, you're going to be putting a lot of force through your arms on the bars. You've also got the throttle, you know, on your right hand side. It is his right one that he did, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, right hand, yeah.
Yep, so that's the worst one. You'd probably, if you're going to have one done, you'd prefer it to be the left hand because you've not got to do the throttle or the front brake. You've only got perhaps the thumb brake or the rear brake on there. So obviously a lot of stuff happening with the wrist on the bike, going to hurt him quite a lot. Obviously he tried. Did he try in Argentina? I think did he pull out in the end of Argentina?
He did some practice sessions just to get a gauge of fitness, but then pulled out.
Yeah, so he pulled out of that. Then he did the whole weekend at Austin, was kind of nowhere, was struggling. But from probably like the second practice session onwards, he seemed a bit better. Now, this is obviously one of his better tracks. He won the race here last year. He was really, really fast. I think he was on pole position as well, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, this is definitely a track that Agora likes. So, maybe you don't want to read too much into it, but it proves that he's kind of getting past the injury a bit now. Obviously, it'll just keep getting better every weekend because it is just one of those things you just have to let it heal itself. And obviously, just because it doesn't get very good blood flow is why it takes so long. But once it is healed, he should be absolutely fine. Obviously, it is getting better now because he seems to be a bit better. So, yeah, I would say he probably should be just getting better from here, improving his performances. Obviously, this is a good track for him. So if he's maybe a bit lower down again next weekend, don't be too surprised. But I don't think we'll be seeing him down sort of 15th, 16th again now. We'll probably be seeing him like 10th on his bad weekends where he's struggling with it.
He also did do a whole weekend of practice for the Junior GP and then just pulled out of the race. He
did he?
Basically he did a whole Moto2 Junior GP kind of weekend where he did all the practice sessions just to get track time, just to get a bit of race fitness, and then pulled out, didn't do the race. So he is taking his
see what you could have done.
That's the thing, yeah, exactly. But I think he didn't have any intentions of doing any racing. I think he just wanted some couple of hours on track just to kind of get an idea where the wrist was at. But I'm happy he's back. I'm a big fan of him. Have been for a while. I was gutted last year when he made a mistake in Sepang, cost the championship, but hopefully he learns from that, and probably is already too late for the championship this year, but hopefully he can just get a couple of podiums. The odd race when they are.
He might win at Austria. He's pretty good at Austria.
Yeah, he's quite good. Does a lot of the heavy braking zone tracks. I imagine Motegi is going to be.
Motegi, those are the kind of tracks you expect to see him pretty good at. Maybe Blood.
Yeah, Christ, actually, yeah, you've a decent turn 1, you've turn 5, you've a few heavy braking zones there, and it's a flooring track, so maybe we could see him.
The greasy conditions will suit him as well. You know, he's grown up riding those kind of tracks in the Asia Talent Cup and stuff like that. So
definitely a few races this year where you'd imagine he'll get a couple of good races. So again, if you can build on last year, this year, get a couple of good results, probably will be in GP for next season. I'd imagine Nakagami's days are numbered, really. I don't know where he's going to go next year, Nakagami, because I don't see him keeping him by his pace, isn't there? I don't think he's even good enough for that because he crashes too much.
I think they wanted to offer it him, though. Oh, yeah, because Bravo doesn't crash.
Well, yeah. I don't think it's an issue of Nakagami not being good enough. I don't think either of them are good enough, to be honest. I think it's the honour of the Japanese. They don't want to sack him. They're just going to move into a test rider role.
Just do a swap, put him in Moto2. See how he gets on.
To be fair, I've considered it, but I don't think Nakagami at this age.
You're making the decision.
Yeah, exactly.
I've considered moving him into Moto2.
Dylan San has made the decision to move you back to Moto2. But moving swiftly on. Spread race early. It was a steady race. Tire management was very key. Early on, immediately we had half a tech in between first and second, 3 dents between second and third. Wasn't really a great race, Rhys, was it, to be honest?
No, it's a bit more like your old Honda Moto2 race, to be honest. They kind of get spread out, and they can't really. They do a lot. Obviously, they've got to manage the tyres because it's so hot. But they've done a lot of tyres pretty durable. It's kind of a bit like the old Bridgestone thing that used to happen, where like the gaps got formed early, and then the tyre performance was so similar for everybody. It's difficult for the gaps to be made up, and because in Moto2 it's effectively a spec series, if you're being honest, because there's only like 4 bikes that are not Kalex machines. it's so difficult for the riders to make the difference. Obviously, there was one rider that did make a bit of a difference today, but we'll talk about him in a little bit. But yeah, it was spread out, not a lot of stuff going on. There obviously was a little battle between sort of Agora, Arbolino, a couple of others were involved in there. Lopez was in there for a little bit, but he managed to get past, obviously, Arbolino. So they were all sort of scrapping a little bit. Dixon was there or thereabouts with them, but yeah, he was a bit off the back of there. Salach was in there at one point. So there was a couple of little battles, but not massively. Probably the most eventful thing that happened in the race was sort of Arbolino passing Agora, not really giving him any space, and then Agora just sort of grabbing the front brake a bit too much and crashing, trying to avoid the back of him. So yeah, it was.
Touched.
Did they touch? Because I saw the replay, but I wasn't sure if they touched at all. I couldn't really see it because I was quite far from the TV because I was at the table at the time because we were eating like dinner at that time. But
not 100%. There was contact.
Contact was there. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think this will be brought up again later on then when we discuss something else.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was probably the most eventful part of the race. I think SDK, I think he fell off as well, but I can't really think of anybody else. So
Vietti.
Oh, of course, Vietti fell off, didn't he, really early on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of crashes, but there wasn't a lot of battling going on in the race. Was kind of just a bit of a follow the leader kind of thing. And like I said, that used to happen with the Honda Moto2s. It's just, I think it's to do with how close, obviously, all the bikes are. And I think the tyres a little bit, and just a hot, greasy Jerez track, people probably not wanting to push too hard. And again, also because everybody knows Jerez so well, it's so difficult. Like, it doesn't make sense almost in a way until you think about it, that when everyone knows the track so well, everybody's so close to the limit, everybody's so close to the ideal lap time, it's so difficult for people to make a difference.
Yeah, it was just one of those races getting to kind of 1 o'clock in the day in Spain. Track temperature was going up.
Just did it so they could have the siesta, you see.
Yeah, exactly.
Boring race, you can go bed.
They were just... it was... Over the last years, Jerez has never been one of those tracks where you go, oh my god, the racing was amazing. It is a more classic track where it's kind of your split between tracks that are amazing to ride usually don't give the best racing, and the tracks that aren't probably the most amazing to ride usually give good racing. It's kind of a split. It's very hard to make a track that's amazing to ride and also amazing for racing. It's kind of you get one or the other, but Jerez, of course, is a fan favourite. It's one of the jewels of the calendar. Formula One has Spa and Monaco. We've the likes of Jerez and Mugello and these kind of Aston tracks. So it's one of the ones every year. Of course, it's a really, really popular track around the world. It's one of my probably all-time favourites tracks out there. And it's so good to watch these bikes on it. They're just so good around there. And it gets to the point where if everyone's at such a speed, it's hard to battle. And unfortunately, we just saw that today. But one man who didn't struggle at all was Sublime Sam Lowes. Now, as a Brit, Rhys, I'd imagine you were probably nervous how he was going to throw it away in such hot temperatures. As an Irish person, I was sitting there thinking, oh, he's completed another lap every time he crossed the line. So I was pretty downbeat about it. To be fair, I only caught the end of qualifying 2 for Moto 2, and I was kind of wondering how in the name of God did he get that much of a gap. Turns out it was just pace. So when it came to the race, I was thinking, surely if he has that much pace, it will be an easy win. And it turned out, kind of was. What did you make of Sam in today's race, Rhys?
It's just kind of a typical sort of Sam Lowes weekend. Like, if you jump back to 2020, this was not an uncommon sight. You know, even parts of 2021, it's just kind of been the last sort of half a year to a year that he's struggled, and it's just because he's been injured. He hasn't really been able to get... You know, it sounds like I'm making excuses for him, but obviously he does crash too much and things like that, and his starts are not particularly great, but they never have been. And to be fair, he's always crashed a lot as well, so I suppose it's just been 2 traits of his that he's not been able to fix, but he's not really been able to catch a break. Comes to a track where he's really good. For some reason, he's really good at the Spanish tracks. I don't know why. You know, he's always gone well at Jerez, he's always gone well at Aragon, although that's not going to be somewhere he's going to visit this year, unless he decides to go World Superbikes for a wild card or something, I don't know, or a test day or something. But yeah, obviously there's no Aragon GP this year. But he just turns up sometimes. Like I said, it was almost like being back in like 2020, where he put some unbelievable qualifying lap in, pole by like half a second. He lost the lead off the start again, a bit like 2020. You know, not really getting the whole shot. But in fairness, he toughed it out with Alonso Lopez, and managed to get back up into second. I thought, you know what, that's a good start for him, but it's like, oh, Costa's already got like half a second, he's going to struggle. He'd passed him by the end of the lap. I don't know how I'd caught him back up and passed him, but just one of those days where he turned up and he was on a different level, and he's had races like that throughout his Moto2 career. You know, obviously Austin on the speed up, Jerez on the Calyx, on the Grassini Calyx back in the day, on the Federal Oil one. You know, he's had weekends where he has just dominated. He's done it at Jerez in the past, Aragon in the past as well, where he's just pulled away. He has these weekends where he's just got something special over everyone, and you don't see this in Moto2 from other riders really. Very, very rarely do you see. You might see someone do something like this in a race, for example, or you might see someone put a good qualifying lap together that's a few tenths clear of the field, but you don't tend to see someone on pole by half a second, someone win the race by like 3 seconds by just dominating someone who we think is going to be a great rider and MotoGP world champion in the future. And it wasn't like then everybody was right behind Acosta, because Acosta had gapped everybody else as well, so yeah, I just don't know. He seems to have found his mojo a little bit now. I'm hoping that Sam can carry this forward, because Le Mans is another good track for Sam Lowes. It's a great track for the Brits because the climate's a bit British, isn't it, with it being in France. The track, I don't know, seems to suit him pretty well. So if there's a bit of rain, you know, watch out for Sam. He could be making it 2 in a row, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, bloody hell, he's bringing himself into contention somehow. So yeah, let's not get too ahead, but it was a great race from Sam. Great weekend overall, and to be honest, I didn't see it coming after the first few rounds he's had, because they've not been very good for him.
Yeah, he surprised a lot of people, and I think it's good for his own confidence, because he even said himself, like, after so long of not being there, you start to wonder if I'll ever get back there, and it's terrible. It's like everyone, these riders, are under so much stress, and they're all pushing so hard to get these results. So it's nice to see someone who's a proven race winner, a world champion in his own right. Probably should have been a champion already in Moto2.
Definitely.
If things went,
that was 2020 should have been his year, really.
Everything.
He was the fastest rider. It's the only year you can say
yeah.
Moto2 that he was clearly the best rider that year. It was just, a bit of misfortune, a couple of mistakes from his own, and some great consistency from Bastianini. Really.
He kind of has taken the mantle from Tom Luthi of being that kind of ever-present Moto2 rider, where every year gets a handful of podiums, might win the race or 1 or 2 races. But then goes missing for a third of the season, where his championship challenge just disappears, and he'll have these weird races and stuff. He's like, when they changed the front tyre in Moto2, it completely took Tom Luthi's challenge at anything out of it. He ended up retiring. But since then, it's like Sam has taken up the mantle of, well, for most of the season, I will be quick. I'll probably crash out of too many races. I'll get enough podiums. I'll keep my seat. If things go my way, I'll win a race. But it's a bit weird, because like, we look back, he's won in Jerez in 16, did the exact same thing on speed up where he dominated. He's won in Texas, he's won in Le Mans, he's won in Aragon. He is a proven race winner. That was a 10th race win in the class, so you can't really argue at this point now that he's got a couple of lucky wins or anything. He is probably one of the most successful riders in the class, and on his day he is rapid. The only issue is his day, shall we say, is few and far between. So hopefully going to track he's won at before in Le Mans, British-ish climate, we probably will see Sam on it again, and it's looking good. But we're going to move on now to the second place man. Pedro Acosta had his championship hat on, took the points. Probably even at this point doesn't see Sam as a championship threat. Saw his qualifying lap, was like, I couldn't touch it. He probably looks at Sam and goes, you're probably not going to do this every week, really, are you, Sam? So he gave it a push for the win, realised Sam probably just had a bit more in hand and didn't risk it. Arbolino not being at the races today at the front, to be exact, any pressure on Pedro. So took the points. Pretty much a smart young Spanish lad taking a nice chunk of 20 points for his championship. What did you make of Pedro's race?
Yeah, it was a good race. He pretty much, I mean, like I said, obviously they pulled away from everybody else as well. He beat Arbolino. That was really his only target, I guess, is to beat Arbolino, to beat Lopez, to beat Canet, those few riders that are near him in the championship. You make a good point saying he probably knows Lowe's isn't going to be there every weekend. I mean, obviously you can't ever discount him, because if you look at his history, obviously you know he's a fast rider, so he could be there on more weekends. But yeah, he's already got a lot of points over him. He knows he's probably not going to be fighting Sam Lowes for the championship, but he does know he's fighting Tony Arbolino for a championship. So obviously he knows that Tony Arbolino's teammate's probably going to do everything he can to beat him. So, there is going to be... I'm sure that goes through your mind a little bit as a rider, but that this guy's probably going to fight really hard for this win, even for himself, but also for his teammate. So, yeah, I mean, he couldn't get near him, though, anyway. Obviously, it was a great race from Acosta. Another good weekend from him. Second place in the grid, second place in the race, beating Arbolino once again. Obviously, just shows that really Argentina was the only blip, really, where he struggled. He's been probably the fastest overall in terms of the other races. What has he finished? He finished first, absolutely nowhere, first, second. So, this is a champion. This is what he did in Moto3, right? He was first, second, constantly. He knows it's a Marquez 2019 kind of thing, isn't it? He knows he doesn't need to beat Sam Lowes today. He could just settle for second. Sam Lowes is not a championship contender. Sam Lowes is not going to be there every weekend. Why push to beat this guy when, you can settle for second? And to be honest, in your head, you probably do think sometimes that he probably also thought that if he keeps pushing, he might fall off, because it's not, it's not unlike Sam Lowes to do that. So there is also that, but I'm sure he was happy to take 20 points. Not worth it for the 5 points. Something that Agora probably should have thought about in Sepang last year. It's not always worth it for those 5 extra points to risk a crash.
Yeah, Pedro, to me, he had his year last year where he was really quick in pre-season. He did everything right coming up to the start of the season, and then had a bad opening couple of rounds, got injured, and then we came back, kind of started to show what he showed in pre-season, got a couple of race wins, was thereabouts, made some early mistakes in the start of the season, crashing out of, I believe he crashed out of Le Mans out of the lead ahead of his teammate.
Yeah, he did.
So he just was everyone's favourite last year. Everyone got on the hype train of him because he was so good in Moto3 and what he did in his rookie year. So the fact that he ended up having a struggle last year, a lot of people were wondering this year would he be able to do it, but he came in even quicker to pre-season this year. He came in, race 1, looked like he was on it. He's had a wet race that didn't go his way, but to be fair, he's been rapid nearly every time he's on the bike. He always looks like he's going to win and going to be there. He doesn't look the quickest over one lap. I never look at him as a pole hound. He kind of reminds me of Valentino in that way, that it's Saturday, he doesn't really show up really. He's thereabouts most of the time, but in the grand scheme of it, it's Sunday where he really shines, where everyone's on the limit and he just seems to find more, like he did in Texas with Arbolino. But going to move on now, I suppose, to the sprint race. Red flag after 2 corners, big crash, 4 riders down, I believe. What did you make of the opening of the sprint race?
Yeah, it was a bit crazy, wasn't it? I mean, the sprint races have always been a bit crazy. Aside from Austin, it was a little bit more sedate. But this one was back to the standard that was set in the first 2 sprint races, quite aggressive. It was an innocuous little thing, really, though, that caused that whole chain reaction. Morbidelli was going up the inside of Alex Marquez. There was a small amount of contact. Down went Alex Marquez, down went Morbidelli, down went Bezzecchi, down went Augusto Fernandez, although Augusto Fernandez just crashed in sympathy as he grabbed his brake too hard and fell off, trying to make sure he didn't hit the back of anybody. So, yeah, it was an interesting start. Obviously quite aggressive. Fortunately, everybody was okay. Obviously, everyone was able to remount. Morbidelli given a double long lap for the next day. I think we'll talk about the stewards a little bit later on, so probably won't dwell on that too much now. But yeah, it's strange because it's such a little thing, but it caused such a chain reaction. You get massive collisions sometimes, or massive front end slides that result in nothing, and you get the smallest little bit of touching between Morbidelli and Alex Marquez, and causes that massive accident, red flag. But like I said, fortunately everybody was okay, and the race was just swiftly restarted.
Yeah, I do remember seeing, because it was first red flag I think we've had all year, if I remember correctly. So a lot of us were unsure whether it was ride your bike back within 5 minutes and you get back to the grid, or rock up and get back on. So we got a bit of kind of missed news put on screen, that it was from Mike Webb saying if you ride your bike back within the 5 minute allotted time, you will be allowed back on track. But then we saw Morbidelli getting his letters on. Bezzecchi actually had cut all his arm as he's putting his leather on, there was a spot of blood just on his arm. So he had quite a rough crash in the opening. He was up over, I believe it was Morbidelli's bike, went off the top of his own bike and really landed awkward. He looks a bit winded. Limped off, managed to get back to the start. They all thankfully restarted, but it was just a turn to a Jerez. It was so tight, so dangerously slow corner. It's going to happen. And again, the long lap, double long lap for Frankie Morbidelli we will cover later, but very small movement from Morbidelli towards, I think it was Alex Marquez, who ends up going down, and they all kind of slide across. Just what can happen, it can happen in any race in the couple of corners at the start, really. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, that wasn't a sprint race thing that could have happened.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
as
people.
It did.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. But KTM's seem rapid again. I don't think we've ever seen KTM so consistent across all sessions as we have done this year. Of course, we had Danny doing a wildcard this round at Jerez. Showed ridiculous pace. Now, he did have a couple of days testing there a couple of weeks ago, so he was already up to speed. Does not matter. Most test riders could have 2 weeks at the track and show up and not be in the top 10. Danny went P1 on day one, rapid speed. Everyone got excited, and it was good to see Danny back. It was good to see him getting a bit of love and support, because what he's done for sport was so good, and he's made KTM into a kind of serial winner at the moment with the bikes. But what did you make of KTM's opening to the season, especially today in the sprint and, of course, the full feature-length race?
Yeah, so first of all, obviously I loved seeing Pedrosa back. It's great because, just remembering sort of the old school memories of the Aliens era and Pedrosa being part of it. It's always great. And he just showed how good he still is. I'm still so annoyed at the way his career ended. It was terrible, really. The way Honda treated him, the fact that they just sort of let Mark take over the direction, which has put them in a mess that they're still in today. Pedrosa clearly just got a bit forced out. The aggressive bike he couldn't ride. He was too little and ended up getting injured and retiring. It would have been so good to see him on that Petronas Yamaha as he got the seat offered to him, but at the same time, I'm really glad that they gave Quartararo a chance because, obviously, as we've seen, he's turned into a real superstar. But yeah, it was great to see Danny back. Great to see him topping some sessions and looking quick in both the sprint and the main race and the qualifying. He was quick all weekend, way better than you'd expect for a test rider. But he's not just a test rider, is he? He is a legend, and actually, he must be probably the first MotoGP legend to ever top a session of any description because, well, probably the only MotoGP legend to ever really compete again after they became a legend, but yeah, whatever. I'll actually answer the question about the KTM now. If you think back to the other podcasts, I've kind of been a bit unconvinced. I've kind of said, this has happened, and this has happened, and this has happened, and this is why it's a bit of an exception, because if we're being honest, they haven't shown any pace really in the main races at all. They crashed both out of Austin. They struggled in the wet in Argentina. Okay, Miller was... Actually, they were both pretty good in Portimao, to be fair. But they were good in both races here. And this is the first weekend where I'm not going to really say there was much of a mitigating circumstance for it. Every other time, I could argue that there was some weird circumstance. It's why they were at the front. I didn't believe it because of the pre-season stuff. But I think now that they've been at the front in at least one of the races at every round, I think it's safe to say that they clearly have improved the bike and they are looking pretty good. And like you say, it's unlike them to be this competitive. They're regularly, obviously, usually they're winning a race with Oliveira. Next race, they're like 20th, not getting into Q2. But it finally seems like they can qualify the bike. They've got two really good riders, and that's pretty much all they've needed, isn't it? Now they can qualify the bike. They've always been good in the race pace. So now they're actually starting at the front, they're showing it. So I think, I probably agree that the KTM is now probably a pretty decent bike. I kind of thought, every other time there was some weird circumstance. And I still think, to some extent, there is sort of... I think the sprint races suit KTMs, and I think the sprint races do provide some strange scenarios, because if you're aggressive off the start and you can keep a position, you can kind of get a... not an unearned position, because obviously you earn it by being aggressive and having the pace, because you still got to have the pace, but it's not like a standard race, whereas you probably would start to drop back if you tried to do that in a normal race. But yeah, the KTM's looking pretty good.
great performances from Miller, great performances from Binder, and of course a great performance from Pedrosa as well. Obviously, the gas bike struggling a little bit more, but you've got a rookie Augusto Fernandez and a Folger that's not been on a MotoGP bike for years, struggling at the back. Obviously, Pol still being injured. So, yeah, if you ignore the gas team, pretty good weekend for the KTM.
It looks like now to me, really, like KTM have kind of made a switch that might be, in my opinion, now you have two very aggressive riders on it, but I think now tyre wear towards the end of the race is where they've been caught. Because it looked like in the feature length race, we'll come to in a minute, that it looked like tyre wear was the one that decided that, not outright speed. Now, the pace they were doing is ridiculous, but it just shows that that's 2 sprint race wins for Binder. Miller's been there in all of them. Binder has showed speed in every weekend we've had, so I just believe that they've made a turn now this year. I think we could be starting to see some of the Red Bull partnership, the rumour that, well, not the rumour, they were working alongside the Formula 1 team Red Bull for some aero secrets and kind of just building a better overall package that's more connected. And I think we might be seeing that, because ever since Miller's got on it and basically been publicly speaking about it, he's only had compliments for it. You have to obviously kind of overlook the first couple of tests, because he spent 5 years on a Ducati, I want to say.
2018.
He spent enough time. 18,
19, 20, 21, 22, 5 years.
So yeah, 5 years on a Ducati. It's going to be pretty ingrained in him that that's how Ducati, or that's how a bike works. So it would have taken a bit of unlearning and relearning how to ride a KTM. So it would have taken him time. So I know early on he didn't look good. He had the odd crash. He was complaining that he doesn't know where the limit is and all this. But that's just what happens when you get on a new bike. It's quite normal. So for the most part, it's been pretty plain sailing for them. It looks like getting rid of Miguel Oliveira has been a brilliant move for Binder as well as Jack, who's come in. They both look like they've kind of benefited from each other being there. Everyone seems happy, and to be honest, so be it. I really am enjoying seeing KTM. They're one of those teams I really like. I love KTM in all aspects of motorsport, whether it be in their motocross days or wherever in the world they're racing. They always seem to find a way to win, and it looks like they've probably got a world champion in Brad Binder, and a very, very good second rider, you would say, in Jack Miller, who looks even better. He looks like he's even made a step this year on that bike. So I'm proud of Jack. He's maturing into him. We'll come to him again later in the race. But overall, KTM pretty solid. But we're going to move on now to the kings of MotoGP, Yamaha. Nightmare continues. Rhys, take it away. What a nightmare again for Yamaha in the sprint.
Well, just a nightmare for them overall, isn't it, really? Not just the sprint, may as well just talk about the whole weekend. Obviously, like we mentioned previously, well, may as well step it back. You come into Jerez. What do you think of Jerez? Corner speed, the flowing sections at the end of the lap. You've got some lovely flowing corners as well throughout the lap. You've got Cito Pond, you've got the Aspar corner, you've got all these different sort of high-speed corners that should suit the Yamaha, and it just didn't work. I think I heard them say that Fabio Quartararo's worst qualifying position before this weekend, that Jerez was second or something like that, second row. Second place.
No, P2.
So that's unbelievable. Even when they've been struggling, he's been good here. This was his standout performance in 2019, or his first breakout performance in 2019. 2020, he did the double here. 2021, he should have won had he not got the arm pump. 2022, second behind Bagnaia, but, maybe another lap he would have been able to overtake Bagnaia right at the end of that race. This is a Yamaha track. Think of all the races Yamaha have won here over the years, but they couldn't do a lap. They couldn't do a lap anymore. They cannot do the fast lap. They have not improved enough. They've got the engine performance okay. Well, they've got the top end, shall we say, but the top end doesn't really help you at Jerez, because there's only the one long straight anyway. And yeah, they were just nowhere. They didn't have the pace. The two of them were pretty close in qualifying, pretty close in both races, well, in terms of actual positions. So it just shows you they're really getting the limit out of the bike. And obviously Morbidelli seems to have got a bit closer to Quartararo this year, even though he was still not really that near him in Austin or Portimao. He does seem to be regularly a bit closer to him at some of these races. So it shows that they're sort of getting what they can out of the package, but they're just nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. This is a track where they should be performing. They couldn't qualify. Morbidelli and Quartararo both have to make a lot of risk on the first lap to make up the time, because once they get with the leaders, they can sort of run similar pace to them, but it's just actually getting there. Morbidelli crashed into Alex Marquez, or it was a little bit of contact. I don't think it was, that bad, but whatever. He had the contact with Alex Marquez, caused the first red flag. They got back on. They both finished sort of nowhere in the sprint, because Quartararo, I think, had got a decent-ish start the first time, but not very good one the second time on the red flag restart. And then in the race, basically the other way around, Quartararo was trying to make up positions, crashed, and then they both had penalties because Quartararo picked up a penalty for his crash at turn 2, Morbidelli his penalty. They both started the race, obviously still nowhere, didn't get that great starts, had to do their long lap penalties, fought their way back through, and were they, 10th and 11th in the end, I think?
Yeah, somewhere around that after crashes.
Yeah, after a few crashes and Vinales' chain coming off and stuff like that. But, 10th and 11th at Jerez. This is one of their best tracks. They are in a mess, and I just don't understand. Because of how close MotoGP is, you need to be on it, and they're just not. They're just not on it. Even with the engine upgrade, they've obviously always thought that this would fix it, but clearly they need something else as well.
Yeah, I remember 2017.
Yes, that one where they struggled.
They were 6th and 7th or 5th and 6th. They were out. They weren't in top 5 anyway. I remember thinking the year before we had gone to the Michelin tires. We'd gone to the standalone ECU, and Rossi won in Jerez. He won in Catalonia, and he showed pace in a lot of races throughout the year. Then we came to Jerez in 17, and I was thinking before the race, surely they'll have a good chance here now. And they absolutely spent their tire early. Lots of wheel spinning, lots of wasted opportunity. The Hondas looked like they had it down to a T. And since 17, that's kind of been the way it is. They don't seem to have any rear grip. That was the one thing Davi complained about, Rossi complained about.
Vinales complained about it.
Vinales complained about, which many other things he complained about. I think there was at one point Vinales didn't know what he didn't know what he wanted, to be honest. Vinales had so many issues with Yamaha, but to think back then like that, they were in trouble at Jerez coming 5th and 6th. They would have killed for that today. I know we're nearly 7 years on, and we're looking at them going, yeah, they're kind of doing okay. P10 wasn't a bad result. It's terrible for them, really. They shouldn't be anywhere near that on the grid. They should be. The fact that Fabio Quartararo qualified 16th and has openly said that he is slower now than when he was a rookie on his 3rd or 4th ever race on an M1. How can that be possible? How can they finally bring the powerful engine that they've always requested, got the engine gains? How can they bring all these new aero, all these new chassis, swing arms, and all these things, and still be slower than what they were 4 years ago at this rate?
Was the time slower?
Yeah, he did 36.9 when he took pole in 19.
Do you know what pole was this year?
Pole was way quicker, but he wasn't, is what I mean.
Yeah, I was just trying to see if the conditions were to do with it. But it'd be interesting to compare. We'd have to have a look, maybe not now, but we'd have to actually have a look and compare some of these race times and qualifying times and stuff.
We can maybe update in the next episode, but for now we're kind of kill the flow of the podcast to go look it up.
Yeah, definitely.
It was widely reported that he is slower now, even though he said himself, I'm riding best I've ever ridden, far better than me as a rookie. And he's now a couple of tenths slower. He managed to get into the 36s from what he kind of said in his rookie year around there, and he said he can't even get a low 37 now. He said he struggled so much, but like that's just so bad for Yamaha, like as a company, as their
how's
brand.
That even possible though? Like, how is it slower?
Exactly, like it's actually now it is a slower track, so you'd imagine that it's probably, if it was a Mugello or an Austria where it's a bit more power related and a bit more air related, it probably is a bigger gap. But a small twisty track like this, it just shows that they haven't made any progress anywhere. And it looks like as well, potentially they've gotten lost chassis-wise, because he said he feels on the limit everywhere. He doesn't know what the front is going to do. He throws the bike in every corner. He says he doesn't know if it's going to stick. And that is not a Yamaha that underneath him. It's simple as that. But they're just lost. Frankie is also lost, but in different ways. He just doesn't get on with the bike and hasn't for about 18 months. But from going from almost winning last year's championship, probably should have winning it if he could have just managed the mid-season better. Like, if he doesn't have that Aston race, that's kind of what cost him the championship. I know afterwards, because if you look at his Aston race last year, now I've covered this in so much detail, but gets the penalty after crash, no score, penalty, screws over, 2 good races for him. There's probably about 30, 40 points there that he probably ended up throwing away, and that would have been enough, and it probably could have got him a second title. But anyway, a year on, they're in deep, deep water. So we're going to move on from Yamaha. Good Saturday for Pecco. Friday he said he was struggling, didn't have any feeling with the bike. Built a better bike for Saturday, and he got a really good result in the sprint. What did you make of Saturday? And we can cover the full final race as well at this point now for Pecco.
Yeah, I may as well just sum up this whole weekend together. He needed a good weekend, didn't he? 2 crashes out of 2 feature races in a row. Not exactly what he wants to do. Obviously, he made his comments after the last race, and you know that those have kind of been poked fun at all week by many different people about saying his bike is too good and those kind of things. I think maybe there's a slight translation issue with that, but it was still a bit of a interesting comment. Yeah, he had a good Saturday. He struggled on Friday. Actually, he had to come through Q1, but he managed to do so. Managed to come through Q1, and in the end, he managed to sort of improve for Saturday, obviously, by coming through that session. Had a pretty good sprint race, second place. In the race, he looked really good the whole time. Obviously, his race, he had the collision with well, I don't even really want to call that a collision, to be honest, but there was the overtake with Miller that was slightly close, that he then got the penalty for. He had to drop the position back. So he had a bit of adversity in the race, but by the end, he definitely was the quickest guy. Managed to catch Binder, pass Binder, managed to beat him on the last lap, managed to keep him behind, do a good lap. So it was kind of a bit more like Portimao, a bit more normal services resumed. I mean, to be fair, in Austin, he also was the quickest rider, really. Obviously, Rins was looking good, but Rins perhaps was quicker than him in the main race, but in the sprint race, he dominated. This is more what we saw in testing, what we expected to see from Bagnaia. So a good weekend from him. Fully deserves the victory. Great race in the sprint as well. Nice to see him bouncing back. Obviously good for his championship, but hopefully for the closest of the championship, this is not the norm. Hopefully he's not completely dominating like he was in Portimao again from now. Hopefully he hasn't gone a massive run, but nice to see him back at the front, and it's a good bounce back from losing a little bit of confidence as well with the front end after those couple of crashes, and of course the on Friday he was struggling with the front end as well.
So for me, what we've had during the season so far is just showing that if he was more consistent, if he was the kind of stone cold killer or Rossi or Marquez, he'd have about 74, 75 points clear already before we even get into Europe, which is 3 race wins.
Yeah,
well,
crazy,
3 standard races. So we actually are blessed that it's under a race win at the moment to second place. He has the best bike. He is probably one of the best riders on the grid. For me, he just needs to start doing what I said that some of the more 3 boys need to do. He just needs to get points on the board. I don't see another rider in the championship that's probably got the consistency week in, week out that can match him in terms of being there in all races. So for me, I don't want to say it's his championship to lose, but it kind of is really. He's going to slowly put points on the board. He's going to win races. He's going to be quick at Catalan. He's going to be quick at Mugello. He was winning last year in Le Mans before he got past and ended up falling. He's going to have another good season. He's probably going to win the title before the last 2 or 3 rounds. He's just amazingly good, but he has a mistake in him is the only thing. But I have to tip your hat to him. And yeah, just overall another solid weekend. He built from Friday, and by the time we got to the last lap on Sunday, he was pretty damn well. But we're going to go on now to the final few pieces in the full race. So we got our second full red flag in T2, another collision. Unfortunately, this involved Quartararo. And while you were talking about Pecco, I went and got up the qualifying times for 2019 and 2023. So just a little insight into what Yamaha have done. So 16th for Fabio in yesterday's qualifying, a 137.072. Remember that time? In 2019, his pole time was a 136.880. That is over 3 tenths he's lost in 3 years. Pretty outrageous.
I have here as well. I don't know whether it's right, but I'm looking on motorsport.com. Apparently, his time was better than Alesia's. I don't think that's right.
Which time his
well, both. This is Alasia did 37.2. Maybe did Alasia do a 36.2?
You need to remember qualifying was wet. Remember we had that kind of Alesia's time was on a drying track. So if Fabio's time was way quicker, it probably would be because the track was dry.
Yeah, but then, oh yeah, it started to rain, didn't it? Yeah, I forgot about that.
Started to rain, yeah.
My bad. Yeah, so if you look at qualifying 1, Bezzecchi did a 36.5, which was obviously quicker than what Quartararo did in 2019.
Exactly.
But not by a lot. So yeah, interesting.
But yeah, it still doesn't look good that the factory Yamaha has gone 3 times slower.
No. Than the satellite Yamaha, which was effectively an old bike then with rev restrictions, and so yeah.
For reference, qualifying 1, Rossi came 13th. He missed out by 1 position. Did a 37.3. That wasn't good enough to get him to 2. It's under 2 tenths off of what Quartararo got him 16th, and that was his outright pace. So
yeah,
it just does not show well. But moving back to the second red flag, it was unfortunate Miguel Oliveira got collected by Fabio. Again, it was a racing incident. Bezzecchi just kind of squeezed well with his rider in front, but it was just one of those racing incidents again into turn 2. Horrible crash. Fortunately, it does look like Miguel has possibly done his collarbone. It is many hours after the race. Unfortunately, we've yet to get confirmation of what injury he has. He was instantly declared unfit for the restart, into the back of an ambulance, off to the medical centre for checkups. But unfortunately, it's just another injury. It's kind of his season over, really, for Miguel. What do you make of it, really?
Yeah, he can't catch a break, can he? Just gets, unfortunately, collecting other people's incidents. It was a bit of a strange one, just kind of 3 into 1, just wasn't really going to work, because Quartararo was sort of level with both of them. Not fully level, but he was sort of, his front wheel was sort of alongside the side of both their bikes. The gap between them just squeezed. And then Quartararo clipped his handlebar onto Oliveira. Down he went, and he just collected Oliveira. So poor Oliveira just cannot catch a break. Again, was looking promising this weekend. In fairness, Quartararo had a good start to be up near him. To be up near him and Bezzecchi. But yeah, it was unfortunate once again for him to be involved. A crash that he did not cause once again, and a crash in which he is injured. Dislocated shoulder, I believe, is what is potentially the issue, but also collarbone break maybe. So we're not 100% sure. If it's just a dislocated shoulder, it should be fine as it gets relocated, provided it's not, happen too regularly. Because if you get it keep happening, then that can cause damage. But if it just happens once and you get it popped back in, he should be okay. He should be fit for Le Mans, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's just terrible, really, because obviously his home race got into by Marquez. This one here, again, he was top KTM in the sprint, or top Aprilia in the sprint. He has good pace. He really gets on with that bike.
Just has no luck. Bless him.
Exactly, he has absolutely no luck. He needs a run of 3 or 4 rounds where he could put a good sprint, a good qualifying, good race, and each week build upon it. And we could actually see a podium for Aprilia. We could see him back there, because I think at the moment the factory boys are kind of misfiring. They're not really getting everything out of their package. So I'd like to see what Miguel Oliveira could do over 3 or 4 rounds if he was kind of given that time on track to build. But he's only back a week or 2 and he's already gone again, and we don't know if he's fit for Le Mans yet. We haven't heard yet, but he's probably not going to be 100% after coming back from a horrible injury in Portimao. Another injury here in Jerez. He's going to be walking limping into Le Mans in a couple of weeks' time. But going to move now to probably the stewards, really. We've kind of covered everything else about how good the KTMs were. Mature Miller, Bagnaia bounces back after a poor week. Our final kind of topic here is the stewards. Rhys, point out how many bad decisions they made this week, if we have time.
Well, we've alluded to it a few times, haven't we? We said, "Oh, we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this." Obviously, it does depend on your views, but generally, I think all of the decisions made in terms of penalties were quite poor. Obviously, started off with the I can't think of really any decisions they made before the MotoGP sprint race, so we'll go from there. But do let me know if I have missed anything else stupid they did before. Obviously, there was the Morbidelli crash. There was a little bit of contact between Morbidelli and Alex Marquez. Obviously, caused a crash. Alright, I do understand that they're trying to set a precedent that if you cause an accident that causes somebody else to fall off, you get a double on that penalty. But obviously, for one, it didn't count for anything because the race got red flagged anyway, was restarted. But that argument does fall a bit flat because you still cause an accident, whether it counted for anything competitively or not. You could knock someone off in a free practice session. They don't lose a position in the race because of that, but you still knock someone off. So, yeah, I think that's, you can disregard that. But it was the first lap. There was a gap, a little bit of contact. I don't think it was a penalty-worthy crash. Just two riders coming together a little bit at a tight corner. So that's the first thing. I don't think he should have got any penalty for that. But Morbidelli got a double on that penalty for very minor contact on an opening lap that unfortunately did, yes, it did cause a crash, but was just one of those things where he was going for a gap and it sort of closed on him. Then we had the main race. Like we were talking about the incident before, and we were just talking about Oliveira being involved in the incident. Quartararo was squeezed between Oliveira and Bezzecchi. You could argue that maybe he could have got himself out of that situation before, but once they sort of approached the corner, he was between the two of them. He didn't really have much to say. He didn't have much to say. He was there between the two of them. They didn't know he was there. They sort of... Well, I feel like maybe Oliveira knew he was there, but Bezzecchi didn't know he was there. And they sort of just saw squeezed together, and unfortunately there was an accident. Like I said, Quartararo, his handlebar hit the side of Oliveira, down they went. And that was a single long lap penalty then for Quartararo. So first of all, that's your inconsistency, because if you're saying that someone knocking somebody off at that corner is a double long lap, you've now given someone a single long lap for the same offence, which, that's already breaking your own rules, because whether you think the crash was penalty worthy or not, they've said if you've caused a crash, it's a double long lap, and then they haven't even applied that themselves. So that's one thing. And then, of course, they get into the race. Quartararo does his long lap penalty, goes on, does it wrong, in fairness, as he exits the long lap. He then goes on the green. I think he was looking so that he could rejoin safely, but he messed up the long lap, had to redo it. I don't really have a problem with that one. Yes, it was harsh, but he didn't do the long lap as he's supposed to, so he has to do it again, and that's the rule. So fair enough, that's fine by me. Got no issues with that penalty. But probably the worst one of the bunch, because at least the other two you could say, okay, there was a move that caused a crash, that, whatever, right? You could at least argue that that's a penalty. But Bagnaia goes at the inside of Jack Miller. It's a bit of a close move. Miller is a little bit wide. There's the smallest bit of contact. Miller has to sit on the bike a little bit. Bagnaia puts his hand up to say, oh, apologies, mate. Miller throws his hand up just to say, what was that, idiot, or whatever, just to show his bit of frustration. Miller even said himself, didn't think anything more about it after that. And then he gets a drop position penalty for that. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. There was barely contact, if any at all, really, because Miller picked up the bike in time anyway, when he was cutting underneath a bike that ran wide, and he got a penalty for that. It's ridiculous. If that's a penalty, you may as well just say you're not allowed to overtake anymore. Just full yellows around the whole track everywhere, because that was not even a dirty overtake. It was a hard overtake, but it wasn't like a proper block pass where he sent it. He went for a gap because the other rider ran wide, and he got a penalty for it, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my whole life. I don't know what you think about that, but it was stupid, and I think they should be sacked. The stewards should be sacked. They need a whole new set of stewards. We've had this so many times. There's been stupid things, but that is the pinnacle. That is a cherry on top. That is a penalty.
Yeah, I agree with everything bar the Quartararo one. The the fact that he didn't serve the long lap penalty. The point I argue with that is the fact that he's coming back onto the racing line. He shouldn't be penalised for looking across and doing a safe re-entry. It's bad track design or long lap design if that's the case, because he's done every part of it. He hasn't sped. He hasn't done anything. He's gained nothing by using that green paint. If anything, he's prevented the chance of a big accident in the final corner. I think they should have a bit of leniency there with a cop on. I know rules are rules, like, but
Yeah,
they
no,
mean
I
nothing
agree
if
in
they're
that
not
sense
followed
that he
properly.
didn't gain anything from it. But if it says in the rules that you have to stay between the white lines and he didn't, then I suppose they don't really have any
Again,
choice but to give him a
I know
penalty.
that, but like he's looking to a left as like people are on the limit coming through the corner. It's he's done it for safety. Now, of course, he obviously didn't do it on purpose, but he's trying to think ahead. All right, they're going to be coming right across my nose. I need to be as far right as possible, and he's gotten it wrong by half a foot, we'll say, as he crosses over the white line. Not a penalty for me, I don't think. I think they should just overlook things like that, like where a bit of common sense comes into it. He didn't like do half a long lap and absolutely gun it and back past someone. He did the full long lap and he's just coming out of it and he's just crossed over the white line. I know the white line is always kind of is gospel in GP. If you cross a white line and leaving pit lane, it's a penalty. It's always these penalties, but in here I think there's just a bit of common sense needed. But again, I disagree with the Frankie penalty, a double long lap. Wait till you hear this. I don't know if you even know this. They have given permission for Yamaha to basically argue the penalty of Frankie, but they've blocked any feedback or kind of a challenging of the Fabio penalty.
How can you argue a long lap penalty that's already been served? Because isn't that the excuse they've used before, that it's already been served so you can't appeal it?
Well, they're allowing appeals for Frankie's double long lap. They're not allowing any appeals for Fabio. So again, more kind of nitpicking and
Why?
inconsistency. I do not know. I've read it already today, and I was thinking
That's
like,
worse.
well,
No, I hadn't read that. That's even worse. Because if you're going to allow someone to appeal, you have to allow everyone to appeal.
yeah, and that's it. And of course, there was a couple of. So we had the aggressive move from Pecco. Well, it wasn't an aggressive one. Jack went wide. Pecco was being optimistic. That was the move. We had an aggressive overtake put on Jack by Jorge Martin. Jack played it back with interest. The two of them were more aggressive than Pecco's one he got positioned down for. Again, if they're going to be this ridiculously tied on penalties, technically they should have both got penalties. Why didn't they get penalties? I'm glad they didn't, obviously, because first off, it was a bullshit penalty for Pecco. He did nothing wrong. He made the corner. Jack was a touch wide. He sat him up. There was probably a hair's worth of contact. Jack was just annoyed at the fact he lost the position and knew he probably was going to struggle to overtake him. Threw his hand up just to, like, probably more annoyed at himself. The fact that the rider afterwards says, yeah, didn't think anything of it afterwards. In the heat of the moment, like, Jesus,
Yeah.
someone like
Everyone's annoyed
passes
when they
you,
get sat up, but like it wasn't
exactly,
that
that's
bad.
it. Like, yeah, like when we saw it at first, right? We saw Pecco put his hand out to Jack, and then Jack throwing his hand up, and I was like, "Oh Jesus, he's after punting him or something." And then watched it back, and I was like, "Geez, that was quite tame." I thought to be something more in it than the fact, because they're good friends, like, so. The fact that Pecco was first apologising, like if that was Jack, he wasn't apologising. He was head down next corner if that was what a move Jack had put on someone, as you saw later on when he put Jorge Martin out into the car park. It gives, again, like we've ever since we've started this podcast, every week we've called for consistency, the lack of consistency, clarity on what is allowed and the decisions. And again, we're here talking about how there's appeals for some penalties, there's appeals for none. They're giving double on laps when there should be singles. They're not being consistent. Again, I don't understand it. I don't understand the logic behind it, but I think we've rambled on for long enough. Rhys, do you have any final words on the Jerez weekend before we finish?
It was a good weekend. It's always nice to see Jerez. It's a good track, historic track. Some great penalty decisions made throughout the weekend. Clearly, the stewards are really good at their job. And yeah, well, don't really have a lot else to say. Good weekend, and hopefully we can see some more at Le Mans. Looking forward to maybe seeing Marquez back at Le Mans as well, and obviously, hopefully, maybe Bastianini can make another step in his recovery as well, just so that we've got a couple more fit riders.
Yeah, satire at its best. But we're going to leave it there. We've wasted enough of your day. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you in 2 weeks' time for the Le Mans episode. See you all in a couple of weeks. Bye bye.